Okay. Well, good morning, folks. Good morning, TAG and members of the public. This is the October 31st meeting of the Technical Advisory Group for the Clean Heat Standard, advising the PUC on matters relating to the design and implementation of the Clean Heat Standard. I'm Rick Weston, Chair, and I will be Chair only for 2 hours today. I had a previous engagement scheduled that I cannot avoid. And I'll turn it over to Emily Levin at that point. Welcome all. Thanks for joining us. And of course, happy Halloween. Folks, usual housekeeping at the beginning. Please stay muted unless you are speaking. Raise your hand, the hand function in Zoom when you wish to speak. Tag members, to the extent you can, please keep your video on. Non-tag members, please keep your video off except when you are speaking. We have some experts and alternates for some of our members. I believe Ben Plotzker and Adam Sherman from EVT. Efficiency Vermont will be here. Is that correct, Emily Roscoe?
I believe we just have Adam Sherman today.
Okay. We've got Matthew Bakerpool from the Department of Public Service. Anyone else we should be alert to?
Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, please.
I was just going to mention that I believe Nora Travis will be joining, at least for parts of the meeting, a little bit later, possibly my colleague Lisa Rector as well, but more for the wood heating related discussions.
Brian?
And then from ANR, I expect Molly Willard and Catherine Servideo from Forest Parks and Recreation for the wood heat discussion around 11.
Great, thanks. Terrific. Okay, we've got a lot to do today. Well, the first thing, of course, I'd like folks to voice any objection, if you have any, to our rearranging of the agenda slightly. Catherine, we're changing the time of the ANR discussion to 11:05. Is that correct?
Yes, because of availability of the ANR staff. So that is not reflected on the public agenda, but I did send out a revised agenda to the TAG members.
Okay, great. Any objection to that, folks? Okay. First thing then is we've got minutes from our October 17th meeting and minutes from our October 24th meeting to review and approve. Can we do that in one fell swoop, or do I have to do that separately? First of all, are there any corrections that need to be made to either of the sets of minutes? Okay, if not, I will ask for a motion to approve them both.
Just Rick, if we weren't here at the 24th, we obviously can't vote on both, right?
Okay, so let's do it one at a time. Okay, good point. A motion for approval of the minutes of October 17th.
So moved. Ken Jones.
Ken Jones, so moved. All in favor, raise your hand. Find my raise hand function. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. They're approved. The minutes of October 24th. Would anyone like to move their approval?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain. I wasn't at that meeting.
Okay, good. Thank
And
you.
Luce as well.
Luce and Emily Levin. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, with that in mind, it looks like they're approved. Very good. Okay, thank you all. Okay, we've got a lot on the agenda today. We're going to be, for a number of issues, we're going to ask ourselves if we're prepared to vote, and if we are prepared to vote on the options, we will do so. Catherine, can I turn it to you to explain just how we're going to handle that?
Sure. So here is, this is also a slight change in the course of the agenda, in the sense that we will be asking for public comment before we take any votes. So that means we're going to have very, very brief opening for public comment throughout the meeting as we move from issue to issue, rather than waiting till the end. So I just note that. And the other thing that we're proposing here is that we do have, for issues that we have discussed at least once or twice at prior meetings, we're assuming that folks are pretty much ready to vote with any kind of clarifying questions. If there have been some revisions to some of the memos, which you got in advance. And so we'll allow for clarifying questions. We're not going to re-debate the issues. But if there's any clarifying questions or new points that have not been raised before, we would be happy to entertain those. And that sort of goes for the public comment as well. We'll ask the public to only raise issues that you have not raised in the past, which have already been taken into account. So that we will sort of reduce the amount of time we have for deliberation. But the next step in the process would be, we would take a vote. If we do not have a strong majority, which I believe has been defined as at least 10 votes, one way or the other on an issue, then we'll open it up for more discussion to see if there's an opportunity for us to make changes in the language, do something that helps us move towards a stronger majority. So that's when we'll have more opportunity for discussion, and then we'll take another vote. If there's a strong majority right off the bat in the first vote, we move on to the next issue. And we will have, obviously a short discussion of how the memo might need to be revised to reflect the decision of the TAG as a whole. I think that explains it for the most part. Any questions? And we'll certainly, take it one issue at a time. And if we need to make adjustments, we can certainly do that. That's my proposal for now.
Hi, Catherine, it's Brian. So I see 11 TAG members, is that right? Or is there 12?
I have not recounted, but we definitely had a quorum.
Right.
10 would be a majority
Patrick
of
Wood is
not
here.
those.
I just have to call in the first about 45 minutes.
Is that you, Patrick? Okay, great. So this is 10 would represent the majority of the full TAG. We're not talking about the majority of the people here. If that was where you were leading in that question.
Well, I knew you counted 8, and if you needed 10 for a majority, then we didn't have them. Now we have 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a super majority. That was my question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sam.
Thanks. So to clarify, when we're sort of going back over the documents, if there are new points, we want to hit on the new points, but not rehash the old points. Is that fair? Okay.
Yes.
Brian, your hand's still up. Okay. Well, thank you, Catherine. And we've allotted 25 minutes for each, roughly. And there are a couple matters that we will not be taking votes on today, given the timing and the state of the discussion at this point. Thank you. Okay, with that.
Brian, your hand is back up.
Yep.
Yeah. Does that include the definition of advanced wood heat? That was unclear to me whether that's where we're going with that, since we got some new information just yesterday.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to, I don't feel that the TAG will be able to make it, is prepared to vote on that today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, with that, let's turn it to the next matter of the, on the agenda. Updates from the PUC. Deirdre Morris, I turn it to you.
Good, I'll be quick. So just on my list, I don't think I need to say this, but reminder, the comments on the draft rule are due tomorrow. I know that's the next thing on the agenda. But just acknowledging that individual members are welcome to file comments as well. Those would just need to be filed in EPUC by tomorrow. Looking forward, both on our end and Opinion Dynamics. So the next order is coming down the pike from the commission will be one, setting the process for determining sector-wide emission reductions and translating those into credit requirements. That should be uploaded any day now. And then one a little bit further down the line is going to be determining the parameters around early action credits. As far as an update on the Opinion Dynamics timeline, that's similar to what I mentioned at the last meeting. Kind of this, a little bit of awkwardness about timing, because their initial schedule had the second draft be due tomorrow, but with the TAG deliberating on issues that would affect that next draft, we've instructed Opinion Dynamics to hold off on releasing the next draft and consider the decisions of the TAG made likely today and move forward from there. And the primary reason for that decision is just so that any significant changes can still have another review period rather than just being incorporated into the final TRM, which is slotted for the end of the year. I think literally New Year's Eve is on the schedule for the final deliverables. And I think that's it. If there's any questions, happy to take them. Yeah,
Yep.
Ken.
Yeah, what's the schedule with regards to the retirement schedule? And I assume that I need to understand better in putting out an order and including it in a rule. I know that the status report talks about, not everything's going to be in the rule. Some things are going to be in other things. So something like the retirement schedule, what is that? Yeah, when, but also what is it? Is it an order? Is it a rule?
Yeah, good question. So the one that I was referencing a minute ago was, it's an order, and it's basically taking that interim order about that proposal for process and formalizing it into, this is the process that we'll be using to determine how to pace the program to meet GWSA thermal sector goals and how to translate those emission reductions into credit requirements that would be assigned. This order does not include who are the obligated parties and what are their first year credit requirements. That's still to come. That will be, we're hoping to get that out about a month from now or so, basically before we would, so we can get feedback on the actual numbers of the goals that we're assigning to the program and the first year credit requirements to the obligated parties. And then those credit requirements are also going to be formalized outside of the rule, like the actual final numbers, so that those are not, static inside the rule. Does that answer sort of the question?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Emily Roscoe.
Yeah, Deirdre, I'm wondering if you can give a really quick synopsis of how the public engagement or general clean heat standard workshop went yesterday. I wasn't able to attend, and I know it's not recorded, and I'm just curious what the attendance was like.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. So last night, the commission held a public hearing on the clean heat standard in the evening. And, the intention of that was, earlier in the month, we had a more technical workshop about the rule, kind of going section by section of the rule and getting feedback there. Last night was more we were intending to get kind of broader feedback, which we did. And a lot of it was not so much about the, language in the rule, but the clean heat standard at large, whether that was, you know, the inclusion of biomass and biofuel as clean heat measures, or, you know, that level of feedback. So there will be a transcript. There was a court reporter there, so there will be a transcript of the hearing that will upload an EPUC and post on the website, but there is no video recording.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Deirdre. What kind of level of participation did you get?
I think we had 87 people there, including the 6 PUC members, so about 80.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to the next item, there are two other housekeeping items I wanted to take up. One is to remind folks that we don't use the chat except for putting in links to relevant documents. It's not, we don't, as I say, record it or save it or refer to it. And number two, something just occurred to me, Catherine, with respect to our voting procedures. We didn't anticipate that 2 of our members, right now, Patrick and Matt Coda, are on phones. If the polling process is as it turns out, is a secret ballot, how will we deal with their voting over the phone? Or is that, I mean, I can imagine the direct messages to you for that purpose, but is there an issue here?
They would, I don't actually know what the capability is if you're on the phone. But
Matt's in a car, so gosh knows he doesn't want to.
But what
not taking public comment at this time, Mr. Porter.
But what they can do is, hadn't
Can
thought
we
about
just
that.
unmute and say, yes, we vote, or no, we don't?
Yeah, we
Yes,
could, but I
say
was wondering if
yea or
it's,
nay.
I was wondering if there's the question of the way the polling works is it's essentially a secret ballot, I think. Is that correct, Catherine? Or no?
I don't know how it displays. What you'll see is you'll just see the numbers, that's true, but I have not made it anonymous so that I guess I could see ultimately the results. Are folks concerned about anonymity in their voting? I mean, I think people have made their positions pretty clear in our discussion.
Okay.
But if folks are concerned, that would have to, particularly the 2 of you on the phone, that would have to attach your vote to your identity, then let us know.
This is Patrick. I'm not concerned.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And
then.
by 10:30, I'll be able to be on video.
Great.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to our first topic, and that is the draft rule and its companion memo, our response to those. Catherine, do you want to put them up on the screen? On the screen, rather?
You should see it now. Everybody see it? Or somebody see it? Okay, so this, just to be clear, I take responsibility for having drafted this. I took language from an email that Emily Levin had sent, and I also included a summary of our discussion from the last meeting. So we've only had one very brief conversation about this, and understand that, whoops, Emily's coming back. I don't know what happened to her. So want to just be sure that we give people the opportunity both to review what was said at the last meeting, but also if there's additional issues. And turn it back to you, Rick. You're muted.
Muted, yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, we hope you've had a chance to review this. It's short, fairly concise as to what we've, as a group, have discussed and thought about with respect to the rule in the companion memo. Luce sent around, we sent around some points that Luce Hillman made. She's going to make those comments directly to the PUC. They can certainly inform our judgment about this memo, but I don't think there's a need to integrate them into this memo at this point. Are there issues here that you want to take up, or how do you feel about the memo, essentially, is the question to the members?
Yeah, and since Emily had a couple of points that she raised and we haven't discussed those at all, Emily, do you want to take an opportunity just to explain or give a brief overview of your points? I think at the top of the memo. No, the first one actually is a discussion of Ken's comment. And then I think number 2 is your comments.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, it mostly just seemed, I think this is a clear summary of the issues I raised, so I think Rick has captured them well. It just seemed like there were some missing pieces where it wasn't entirely clear to me how the rule would relate to the TRM and the process for updating the TRM. It also seemed like the review of consequences should be in there somewhere. I know we've gotten public comments to that effect as well. But yeah, I guess overall, there was information up there about what I noticed in the draft rule was that there was a sort of a process laid out for what was it? For kind of keeping the emissions table updated every 3 years. And I could envision it being useful to lay out just kind of a general update cycle, like every 3 years, or I guess the review of consequences is every 2 years. So I'm not sure how to resolve that, but every 2 to 3 years, there's kind of like a checkpoint where there's an opportunity to update the TRM. People can propose new measures. It's sort of like rather than just having those be sort of ad hoc on a rolling basis. I'm not opposed to an ad hoc process as well, but I think it would be better if a technical consultant were engaged to do kind of a more holistic update just based on new data, new evaluation studies that are available every 3 years. So I think I'll stop there. I think these comments are pretty straightforward, but it just felt like they were kind of, I didn't see them in the draft rule unless I missed them somewhere.
Thanks, Emily. Anybody else have thoughts? Well, this might be fairly straightforward. Catherine, let me turn it to you then.
Well, I think then our first question to you would be, given that we haven't had much discussion on this, this is just the second time we brought it up in the last meeting, it was very brief. My first question to you, are folks ready to vote on this? And so I'll launch a question that asks you exactly that. It's basically, I'm ready to vote on the memo, yes or no. And then we'll move to an actual vote.
Oh, wait a minute. Hang on a second.
And
wait a minute before, I haven't voted. Something's, this is question number 1. This is interesting. I don't have an opportunity to vote. The poll it goes right to this is interesting.
People are voting. Is anybody else having trouble?
I wonder if it's because I'm a
Host?
host.
Maybe.
It's not giving me.
Probably. Okay. We'll have to
Catherine?
undo your co-hosting then.
Okay.
Just so you know, someone posted in the chat that said everybody in the Zoom, like the public, can vote on this as well.
Yes, no, the public cannot vote, should not vote. Yes, it's true, it's open. I'm asking that the public not vote. I should have made that very clear. This is only for TAG members to vote. So, yeah, please do not vote if you're in the public.
Oh, yeah, this has nothing to, absolutely not. I thought we.
Okay, let me undo you. Withdraw co-host permission.
Okay, there we go. All right. There you go.
So we have 2 people who are not prepared to vote. which, according to our prior procedures, that sort of eliminates the option to vote. But I would love to hear from those two folks what it is that is concerning, and if there's something we can do to make a difference. We have 11 that are ready to vote and 2 that are not.
Sure.
So
I'll
yeah.
go. And yes, I just, yeah, we had a brief conversation last week. I haven't had a chance to review this through the chain of command, so another week would be appreciated.
I hear you. And Emily Roscoe.
Yeah, I'm fine to vote for this, but also flagging that I didn't have enough time to run this through just the section about updating the TRM with Ben Plotzker, who manages our TRM. So fine to vote this forward. I think from my knowledge, this looks fine, but also agree with Brian if we wanted to hold off and another voice was helpful. I didn't have full time to review this with everyone that I felt like needed to be reviewed. So I could go either way.
And Luce.
Hi, I wondered on item 1, actually, we don't, it's a very sticky issue, right? And I guess we're not going to vote on it one way or another. That's my concern. We don't want to take a stand. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's being delayed, which means that it will not meet the deadline that has been set forth by the PUC. So we will not have the opportunity to respond within the time frame that the PUC has set out.
Okay.
And Jared.
Just wanted to state that I voted yes, but that a lot of my ready to vote yeses will be ready to abstain on votes. Like on this one, and unless there's a real clear direct health connection, that, you know, my approach has been to abstain on any of these votes.
Okay.
So just want to.
And I have included an abstain on all votes. So you would have the opportunity to abstain on all votes. So Brian, it seems like Emily is on the fence. So you're really the one that does not want to proceed.
I'm sorry for not raising my hand. I just wanted to clarify Luce's comment because I had, maybe I misinterpreted, but I thought what Luce was asking was whether we were okay with the language in number 1 or whether we wanted to have some discussion about whether the tag should actually discuss whether, you know, does the tag agree with this statement from the PUC and do we have a position on it? Maybe that's not what you were saying, Luce, but I just wanted to, in case that
No, that's exactly what I mean. Are we going to take a stand or are we going to not take a stand and just, you know, let everything else go before the legislature?
And you mean take a stand on whether the clean heat standard makes sense for Vermont?
Correct, in its present form. Right.
Yeah, and that wasn't how Catherine answered your question, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, that is exactly my question. Are we going to just, because there's a lot of different views, obviously, on this committee, so are we just going to let that be and let the PUC make their decision? Or are we going to recommend or advise for something? That's my question.
The way this is written, we're saying that we don't agree with the statement because we're saying that we have not discussed this. That's all we're saying.
Yep.
We're not taking a position one way or the other, but we haven't discussed it. It hasn't been, frankly, it hasn't been part of our mandate. It's not something that we would have discussed. Okay. But we are objecting to what we're pointing out really is the ambiguity of the statement that we don't want the PUC to imply in this statement. We're unhappy with the implication of the PUC's statement that the tag has in some way or another reached this conclusion. That's really what we're saying.
Because the word "our" you feel includes tag, right?
Correct. Well,
Right.
we're worried that it might be read by the legislature to include the tag. That's right.
Right.
So we're not saying one way or the other whether we agree with it. We're just saying we haven't discussed it.
Well, and do we want to discuss it? That's my question. Or are we, you know, it's not in our mandates, so we just stay off that topic.
I personally, at this point, don't think it's something we ought to
Okay.
devote time to. I think that when the legislature, I mean, we'll see what happens when the legislature convenes. We may be asked either as individuals or as a tag, as the tag as a whole, although I doubt the latter, to weigh in on this question.
Floyd, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, given what Rick just said and to follow up on Luce's question, is there an opportunity to bifurcate this memo so that we could take a vote on item 1 and leave the rest of it for another day? I mean, to me, it's an important point that, you know, we haven't had that discussion, and the implication that we were part of that decision or that conclusion by the PUC, I think is an important distinction to make.
The PUC is asking for responses tomorrow. So any delay that we impose on ourselves.
Right. I mean, but could we just respond on just item 1?
1 is what you're asking.
Yeah.
And not any of the rest of the memo?
Well, I mean, it doesn't seem like we're prepared to respond to on the rest of the memo, right? Or we're not prepared to vote on the rest of the memo.
Well, and I would turn it back to Brian and say, Brian, you're really the only one that's said you needed more time, definitely needed more time. Is it that portion, is it number 2 that you need more time to take through? What is it that is you feel like needs additional review within ANR?
Well, I guess I'll open with saying I thought I heard Emily Roscoe say that she would benefit from additional review as well, particularly on the technical issues. So I don't know that I'm the only person, but I could support if the group thinks it's important to make a statement in number 1, I could be prepared to vote on that.
Well, let me go back for a moment. When we polled our willingness to vote on this, we had 10 folks say yes and 2 people say no. Okay, on the memo as a whole. I regard that as a fairly strong majority on the question of voting. So I think we should vote on it. And if folks don't agree with the memo, then we can have that, we have that discussion. We might have a vote of, 6-6, and then we don't forward the memo. It seems to me that though we're giving feedback to the PUC on the draft rule on several issues, and we're making a statement about how we don't agree with the characterization generally, or that we don't agree or disagree. That seems to me to be fairly straightforward and non-controversial, but that's my feeling on it.
Emily Roscoe?
Yeah, I would be prepared to vote if we could talk about 2 things. One, at the end of this memo, I think it's the last sentence. Yeah, it says, given the extensive discussion in the companion memo on the development of an alternative, will not have been evaluated by the TAG or the EAG. I'm just curious where the EAG part came in. Rick, was that discussion with Mia?
No, that was a comment that Matt made at our last meeting.
Okay, I don't feel comfortable. Yeah, I mean, I agree that the EAG hasn't covered it, but I think because we're the TAG, we should probably limit this document to the TAG and not say anything about what the
But just take
EAG
out the
is.
references to the EAG in both those sentences.
Yeah,
Or
I
in
would
that
recommend that.
sentence, rather.
And then I'm curious, I know I was in the last meeting, but if somebody could just remind me how we came up with the TRM process for updating installed measures and keeping that similar to the process outlined in the rule, that would be great.
You're talking
Just
about
to
number
hear some
2,
background on that.
points
Yep.
in number 2.
Yep.
Emily actually, Emily submitted this in writing. We did not discuss it. So this is the first time this is being discussed. So
Yeah, it would
Emily,
be great to discuss this a little bit.
Emily Levin, do you want to say anything more about that? We lost her again.
No, I'm here.
Oh,
I was trying to align this with a similar process to what I understand happens with the EEUs, which is, I think there's sort of, I don't know. I don't know that we need to specify the details of what the process should be so much as at this point flag that it appears to be missing. Like, I think to me, that's my bigger concern. Like, I don't have strong feelings about exactly how this should unfold and how best to align it with existing processes like the Efficiency Vermont tag, or, whatever processes exist. I think that we should try to align them where it makes sense. But it was striking to me that it seemed to be missing. Like, I just didn't understand. Yeah, it felt important to me to mention something about how the measure characterizations get updated in the rule, as well as the review of consequences. Like, there was no reference to the TRM that I saw at all. So that larger point, I mean, it's possible we could take out some of the detail in my recommendation, because like I said, I'm more concerned about it being missing than proposing any specific solution.
So Emily, would you propose that this last sentence be modified to say simply that the tag recommends that the PUC review the process and consider
or include a process at all?
Include a process.
Well, Emily Roscoe, your thought on that?
I'm fine either way to keep it as is, or if we want to keep it simple, I think aligning with existing TRM processes in the state. I think either way makes sense to me. I just kind of wanted to, hear Emily talk about it, and that this makes sense to me. Thanks.
Okay, so it sounds like we could leave it as is. Unless you want to propose a change, Emily Levin. Or anybody else has any concerns about the way it's drafted. Brian, I'm curious, how does this, you personally, understanding that you have not had a chance to consult with others, is there anything in here that concerns you?
It's not about me personally, right? It's about, like, I'm representing A&R, and so that's, but what I might think is a little bit irrelevant. I think what Emily Levin just said regarding that, not here's what the solution should be, but that there should, these should be addressed. That's helpful. I think we're number 2. It seems to be a kind of a different animal than 1 and 3. In 1, we say, we didn't evaluate this alternative, so we're not ready to support this statement. And 3 is saying, if we're considering alternatives, we think the rule deadline finalization should be extended. If you do those 2 things, and maybe change 3 to not focus just on the development of the alternative and ask for more time, then that allows more time to dig into the technical issues regarding the TRM that are being presented here in number 2.
This was actually, number 3 was not asking for more time on the draft rule. It was asking for more time overall in the process. Long-term process, as I understood it, is being proposed.
Finalizing the rule. So to me,
Ken?
that says more time to make comments on the rule.
Ken?
Yeah, but that observation actually raises a concern to me. I agreed with 3 only if the PUC was going to establish an alternative to the clean heat measure, clean heat standard. I don't want this to be an opportunity for the PUC to say, oh, we need to extend the rulemaking process on the clean heat standard. Because, well, that's a long discussion, but that was not my understanding of this. That my understanding of this needs to be extended if the PUC, and in fact, it probably isn't well crafted, because if the PUC says we need to do something other than the clean heat standard, then probably the legislature needs to do legislation different than the clean heat standard, in which case it kind of is obvious that the review of anything different is going to be different than the review of material that goes into a clean heat standard rulemaking. So I don't want that 3 communicated like we need to extend the review process for the rulemaking on the clean heat standard. That I don't want. But that's also not how I read it. I read it only if there's an alternative presented by the PUC, alternative to the clean heat standard, then we're going to need more time on it.
And just to be clear, Ken, you're absolutely right when you say this is not the PUC does not have the authority to do anything but the clean heat standard, right? If it's going to be changed, it's going to change it in the legislature. Emily Roscoe.
Yeah, this discussion also has brought up some new concerns for number 3 as well. I think that, I can't remember if it was in the last equity advisory group or the last TAG meeting, but I do remember the PUC giving an update on the alternative to the clean heat standard. I think it was in the equity advisory group. And I'm not sure if they can talk on that more now, but I believe they said the commission will be focusing on the draft rule and not getting into the details of an alternative past the Act 62 recommendations in the companion report. And so I also wanted to add that I think that the TAG weighing in on an alternative seems like a strong policy objective versus a technical one. And so I'm not sure I agree with jumping into that unless the commission has asked the TAG to do so. But yeah, I'm curious if the PUC can give an update on that, similar to the one they gave in the equity advisory group.
Just before we move there, I wanted to note that this was raised by Matt at the very end of our discussion at the last meeting. And I got the sense from Matt's comment that he was not, did not feel strongly that the TAG had to endorse that. But if Matt, if you're on the phone and you want to say anything about this, that would be helpful. But so this came from Matt Coda. And it was not really discussed at all. So I'm wondering if this is something that, Matt, you feel strongly about or could be deleted, given the amount of discussion we now have on it. I don't know, Matt.
Matt said he was on a plane this morning, I think.
Oh, on a plane. Okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm just sensing that there is, because we haven't discussed it, because there's not much alignment around this at all, that maybe eliminating it at this time would be one option for consideration.
Eliminating number 3, you mean?
Yes, number 3.
Yeah, I think I would be supportive of that. I hadn't thought about it very much, but I was persuaded by Ken's remarks, and I think eliminating a sense that we were advocating for a delay would require a lot of additional wordsmithing and discussion that we probably don't want to get into. And the other 2 pieces are more about like responding directly to what the actual words of the rule or what we think should be in there and what isn't. This is a little different.
So before I delete this, is there anyone that feels strongly that we do need to say something on this and should spend the time wordsmithing? Raise your hand, please. Okay, it's gone. So that leaves us with, it seems like people are fairly comfortable and understand the intent of 1. And Emily has explained, and we haven't had any strong objections to 2. So wondering, I'll just go back to you, Rick, for our next steps. We could vote on the amended version.
I think we should.
And I guess, Brian, that would leave you in a position that if you, if you had major objections after consulting within ANR, those could be submitted separately. If in fact this is approved. So let me go to the second poll and let's see where we are. So this poll question reads, approval of the tag comments on the draft rule. That you're submitting approval on these comments as amended, I will say verbally, as amended, to be sent to the PUC.
Yeah, and just obviously just tag members.
We have,
I know we're not taking public comments, but I actually do think this is an important point. So I'll just raise
right,
it.
actually, we were actually meant to take public comments, but I apologize. So, do you want to speak on behalf of Pike, or can I just ask Pike if he has something to say?
Sure, Pike can.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Pike. I apologize.
One of the fundamentals in the equity advisory rubric is transparency. Transparency is mentioned several times in the clean heat standard as well. And at this point in time, going to this anonymous voting system is really not appropriate and undermines any faith that I have in this process. Thank you.
Okay. Nick, your hand?
I just wanted to thank you for including the provision that the rules should include procedures for performing the biennial review of consequences.
Nick, please speak up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you get closer to your mic or whatever you're speaking into.
Can you hear me now? I wanted to thank you for including the recommendation that the draft rule include procedures for performing the biennial review of consequences. And I think that that should be expanded to also include procedures for taking action based on the biennial review, which might include removing the eligibility of measures, restricting their use, changing the TRM. I think it would be better if that thought were included. Thank you.
And Annette.
Yes, I wanted to comment on number 1. I think it's not appropriate. I didn't read it the way that Rick was reading it. I don't think it's appropriate for the tag to weigh in on it. The legislature tasked the Public Utility Commission with doing something, and that's their opinion. And if you're going to ask them to change that language, to say that the EAG and TAG didn't discuss it, I think you need to stay within your wheelhouse. And if you didn't talk about it, you didn't talk about it. But number 2 is the stuff that you need to be commenting on. And I don't see why it's relevant for the TAG to weigh in on the commission's determination, which they have been tasked with. And in terms of getting, I'm glad you got rid of 3, but in terms of getting any extension, the PUC is doing what the legislature told them to do, and they have a deadline, and I don't see there's going to be any extension. So, but I sorry, I didn't read number 1 the way you're reading it.
So responses now, we can retake the poll, but I also want the tag to have an opportunity, and having heard the public comment, if you have any other additional, and I see Alec, your hand is up.
I would just like to second Pike's objection that if there's a way that we could add transparency to voting, can we do that?
We can have you all raise your hand in the chat, which identifies you. If that's the preferred.
Not in the chat, but yes, we can.
Whatever's easy, yeah.
Yeah, we'll just take the vote on, we can pull the poll up and just, we don't respond to it except verbally or visually. So.
Yeah, I'd rather it not be verbal because that'll be too hard to keep track of verbal and hand.
right,
So just do one mode. Yeah.
I will just say once again that I'm content to keep point number 1 in the memo. I think I've read it properly, and I'll go further to say that I don't think it was in the PUC's mandate to challenge the what's the word? To actually go back to the legislature and tell them that the law should be changed. So, I mean, they're free to do that, but I personally don't think that's the case. And I don't want anybody to think that the tag is weighed in on it one way or the other. That's all.
Ken?
Yeah, to get to Pike's point, I agree with this transparency, but if administratively, if we do it this way, because it's easy and it's unanimous, I hope that meets, because again, I don't think anyone's trying to hide their vote here. If it's not unanimous, perhaps the minutes can show that whoever it is that voted against or abstained, they can be identified. But again, I want to, you know, I agree with the transparency, but I think this mechanism's fine. As long as it's identified who's voting. And then, and I agree with Rick with regards to the language in number 1, because our work, if you look at the work, the kind of the record of what's gone on in the last 12 months with regards to the clean heat standard, a great deal of it is work that's been carried out by the TAG. And so that thing of our work, if I were reading it as a legislator, I would look at our work as being the entire volume of work that's been done over the year. And I agree, we had nothing to do with that conclusion. And in fact, I don't believe, and I you know, I'm going to be filing my own comments, but I don't believe any of the work published by the Public Utility Commission supports that. You know, none of their rules, orders, responses support that. So I go well beyond what this language says, but I think this is appropriate. We had nothing to do with that conclusion, and it needs to be put in there.
Okay, well, let me just share the results. And if folks want to do a revote, I'll happily do that. And we can do that in the chat. But this is what the vote results are. So you'll see that you should be able to see that there were 9 approving the comments as amended and 1 not and 1 abstained.
Well, we should, I agree with the transparency point too. I hadn't even thought about it previously. So we should say who, you know, who voted for and who voted against, and who abstained. Were there 2 abstentions? It looks like there were 2 abstentions.
No, oh, yes, you're right. 2 abstentions.
That's fine.
I was one of them.
I assume.
You abstain?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is Patrick Wood. You can add me to the 4 number to get to 10.
Okay, so you are approve.
Yes.
Okay. And we had 1 other abstention and 1 I do not approve.
Jared already stated that I would abstain.
Jared Olmer.
Okay, that was Jared.
Yep.
And would the individual who does not approve identify themselves?
Yes, that was me, Luce. I am reviewing what our tasks were as TAG. I'm just looking at all the procedures to make sure. It just, what bothers me is we're advisory, and it seems like we've looked at all these complicated items, and we should have a decision if we think it's a good thing for Vermonters or not. And I'm reviewing the duties of the TAG here to see, and I might be stepping out of line from the duties, but it seems like we have been very involved in this process. And the legislature will want to know, what do we think of this? And perhaps that's an individual testifying at the, in January. I don't know. That's what I said, no.
I hear you, Luce. But if you're referring to part number one,
I am.
They may want to hear what we have to say about this. We just haven't had the.
Right. We haven't had the discussion.
But I actually don't think our duties include making a determination as to whether that's an interesting point, whether the CHS is viable. We might go through our 10 duties and realize we've got some real challenges in front of us. But then to take the next step and say, scrap the whole thing and try something else, I'm not sure is a TAG point.
But before we open up that discussion, Rick, this first point does not say whether we will take a position or we will not take a position. It just
It
says,
doesn't say, it says we haven't discussed it, we haven't taken a position.
So it doesn't.
And we won't be able to, because we're not going to meet the deadline, right? That's
correct.
That's the part that we won't be able to make the deadline.
Which is tomorrow.
So that's why I voted no, just because I feel like as a TAG, we should at some point discuss all these elements, the good and the bad, right? And make some solid recommendations on the parts that we really like and how to improve the parts that need improving. So that's the end of my comments. Thanks.
This is Patrick Witter. I just want to say I second what Luce said, and I agree with her. That said, I also agree with this statement, which is why I voted yes. But if later, even if it's after a deadline, I think it would be good for the TAG to discuss that. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
So the official count is 10 in favor, 1 opposed, and 2 abstaining. That meets our definition of a super majority. So that would
strong majority.
Excuse me, strong majority. So that would suggest that we would forward this to the PUC as amended, which means we eliminated number 3.
And we took out E8. Oh, that
was part of 3, so we took that out entirely.
Not to belabor this, but I wonder if maybe the notes could share Luce's objection. So, because I'm a little worried that a no vote would imply that there's disagreement with anything actually written here, which there doesn't seem to be. I don't know. I'm just wondering about that.
I think we've dealt with this issue at this point, and we should move on.
I mean, we get certainly in the notes to this meeting summary. Are you suggesting, Emily, that can be clarified?
Yeah,
and it's also in the recording, by the way.
Moving on at this point, it's fine.
Okay. All right. Back to you, Rick. We're already, just to note, 25 minutes behind. We will make it as far as we can make it.
Indeed. Well, that means we're going to forward the memo because we have the 10 votes. And we move on then to treatment of land use change in liquid biofuels in their CIs. We'll start with a very, very brief summary of the pros and cons. What this memo, the changes in this memo, as I recall, and you'll put it up for us.
We're on land use change. Yes.
Land use change. There's no change in the options. Where the changes in the memo are in the description of the pros and cons.
Actually, I don't think there's any changes in this memo at all.
In this one?
Yeah.
Which one am I confusing it with?
Land use change.
Yes.
You're confusing it with avoided methane, I think.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Forgive me. All these memos. Yes, no changes. Okay. So we can do a very brief, very
Yeah,
brief.
and we just note that like for other of the memos, there were like 3 or 4 options that we were able to consolidate down to like 2 or 1 preferred option, whereas this one just had the 2 that are categorically opposed.
Right. Forgive me, I'd forgotten. And so the question is, if people want to be quickly reminded as to what the issues are, and then we'll ask ourselves if we're prepared to vote on this statement. And if we are, we will then vote.
Ken?
Yes, I have a quick question, but unfortunately, it may be a difficult answer to come up with. How much of an impact does it make to include land use change if we use the same factors as are used in California? How much of a change does it make to the carbon intensity values? Even roughly, is it 50%? Is it 10%?
Lloyd has a response, I believe.
It's more than 50%. And that's a reflection of, California at the time being overly conservative with the science that was developed at the time. And they have not moved from that position, even though the science has evolved since then, using the same model that they adopted. And it has gone down substantially from that level. So to give numbers to it, soybean biodiesel is about 25 grams CO2e per megajoule, give or take. And the ILUC value that's assigned to it in the current regulation is 29.1. So the upshot of Vermont including that in its CHS would be to make biomass-based diesel fuels derived from crop-based fuels feedstocks to be substantially more costly than they otherwise would be.
Thank you, Floyd.
This also has some interaction with how the step down, the CI decline over time is implemented, but some analysis that CLF did that is in the public record, and they modeled some aversion if you included this, and it did cause renewable diesel and biodiesel soy, both of those soy-based stocks, to kind of fall out of eligibility earlier, but that also intersects with this step down time scale too. If it starts to drop below 60% in like 2040, for example, some additional feedstocks like canola might start to fall out as well of eligibility. But the waste-based feedstocks would remain eligible. It looks like the corn-based feedstocks would remain eligible.
Okay, I'll call myself. Floyd, I may need you to repeat what you just said. California was conservative, but further work is changing those assumptions. Is that correct? And that those numbers are actually falling, or whatever the appropriate descriptor of the directional movement is. Is it that the impacts, the deemed impacts on land use are getting smaller with respect to the fuels?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair summary. I think I've discussed this in previous TAG meetings before, but the history of it is that it started at about 300 plus grams CO2e per megajoule, went down to 60, the first fully adopted version of the ILUC, and then a few years later that went down to 29.1. So already that's a kind of a 90% reduction. And then the current work from Purdue from last year using the GTAP model that's adopted in the board, in the LCFS, but updated with the latest field observational data, shows that that number should actually be closer to 9.1 to 9.7. So you can see the progression of the numbers using that model has gone down. California, for whatever reason, has failed to keep up with those updates.
This document, this statement does not take a position on what that if included land use changes, for the computation of CIs. The document does not take a position on what they should be. It's merely, and I'm making a statement, but it could be a rhetorical question. It merely states that such changes should be recognized if in fact they exist. Is that a fair point?
Well, I guess I would question the last part of your statement, if in fact they exist, because I think there's a lot of debate on whether they exist or not. So I'm a little hesitant to say that, yeah, we should try to, quantify this to the extent possible, because I don't know if that makes sense. I think to the extent that it's discussed in the opinion dynamics work qualitatively, that might be okay, because that is a recognition that there's a ongoing debate of whether land use change as a result of fuels policies is a valid concern. But going beyond that and trying to quantify that, especially with Vermont's relatively small fuel demand compared to California and the West Coast that uses this estimate, I think that might be a potential way to address it, and which is why I posed the question: how should this be considered? That's not limiting it to a quantification. That could be considered as a qualitative sort of analysis.
I just wanted to note that there is some, I might disagree with how Floyd has characterized California. I know CARB is having discussions right now that could also result in having increases in the land use change assumption. So, that's an active flux, but I do agree that, we're not determining exactly what those values should be. We are merely stating that they should be included or excluded, and then leaving it up to experts to figure out, if included, how that should happen.
Yeah, can I respond real quick to that? I do take a little bit of exception to that characterization. California is going through a rulemaking right now to basically double down on the LCFS targets. So they're considering adopting much more aggressive CI reduction targets. They put into the proposal consideration of additional land use change values for what they're calling high-risk regions. They're not saying we're going to take the land use change values that we have adopted for soybean and canola and going down with those. They've never said that. They basically said, hey, there are these other regions that may implicate deforestation and other things like that. Those are things that we may want to assign different ILUC values to, and that's all they've said. They've never said anything about changing soybean and canola values up or down.
I don't think it's probably worth going any deeper on this issue with the tag, but I just your prior characterization that they're only moving in one direction of getting smaller, I think there could be some debate about that.
Well, I'm talking specifically about the GTAP model that's hardwired into the regulation. So there are other academics using other models. I agree with that. And, those could go, all over the place, which is another point about the inability to verify these ILUC estimates. But if you're looking at the model that is incorporated into the LCFS, that has clearly shown a progression as shown by the Purdue work. And Purdue is the developer and maintainer of the GTAP model.
Okay, I'm going to ask that we sort of set that aside now, not continue that conversation. Sam, do you have anything additional you wanted to add? And just a reminder, we're sort of not re-deliberating the points that have already been discussed. We are simply adding anything additional or clarifying questions.
Yeah, thanks. I just had a question. So it seems like we're sort of thinking this in two ways. One, exclude, which would prevent, say, inaccurately high values from being associated with land use change, if we believe that they're inaccurate. The other would be to say almost, hey, let's include whatever's true, right? And so from a practical standpoint, if we're looking at what the model will show in the near term under the program, what does that look like? Does it look like an artificially high value, or does it look like something that could be more reasonable? I think that's a determining question for me, and I'm maybe directing that toward Floyd.
Did you guys want me to answer that, respond to that?
I think it's a question regarding the model. Yes, if you can.
I don't know, honestly. I'm not aware of anyone who has used that model for a volume shock equivalent to Vermont's 100 million gallon demand. I suspect that whatever comes out of that model is going to be noise, just because the models are global equilibrium type models, and they're not really designed to respond or simulate market responses to something that small. And as we've said before in this issue paper, the production capacity in the US and Canada for these feedstocks is multiples of what Vermont could possibly consume in this CHS program. So I think if you did the work honestly, you would get a number so small as to be relatively negligible. And then what have you achieved at that point? So
okay,
we made that point in the issue paper.
Yeah, thank you. Ken?
Yeah, I'm just going to say I'm going to vote for option one, and this is the reason. I know we talk about, well, we can come up with a better number for land use change, but the fact of the matter is this needs to happen very, very, very quickly, and we don't have the better number. And right now, Vermont imports essentially zero of the biodiesel, renewable diesel products. And I think that the intent of the legislation was to begin down the path of getting biodiesel, renewable diesel into the energy stream here. And while it may not be the correct number to start, providing that signal that it is a lower carbon intensity value should happen quickly. And the way I understand the long-term implementation of the rule is we get to go back and refine the carbon intensity values as we go down. But it is going to take time to have that first product come into the state. And I don't want to delay it because I worried that we don't have a carbon intensity value, therefore we're going to hesitate in terms of any assignment of value to the credit for bringing in the fuel. So that's why I think in the short term, excluding the land use change component is appropriate, and that's why I'm going to vote for it. But it doesn't mean that I don't believe land use change is important. We just can't deal with it, and I think we have time to get to a better number down the road after we begin the importation of renewable diesel products and biodiesel. So that's why I'm going to vote for option one.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and give the public an opportunity to comment before we vote. We're not going to vote on whether we want to vote because we've discussed this at least 3 different meetings, and I think the memo has remained pretty constant for the last 3 weeks. So I think we're ready to vote, but I want to make sure the public has an opportunity to raise any new issue that has not been raised before.
And keep comments to a minute, please.
Okay, I don't see any hands from the public. So I'm going to launch this question.
Catherine, before you do, I did wonder, I'm just trying to double check the language in the proposed, the draft rule. So I guess I would feel a lot better. You know, I suspect I'm going to lose the day on this one. I will see how it comes out, but if it could somehow be communicated what Ken said, that this isn't like a permanent exclusion, but that it would be revisited as part of the process to update the emissions table over time, which maybe is implied, but I don't know if that's implied, and I just want to make sure that whatever we're conveying is not, that people aren't voting for a permanent exclusion if they didn't need to.
I think it's important at this point for us to recognize that these kinds of actions, these kinds of investigations by the PUC are not written in stone for all time. They always are amenable and amenable to updating, and in fact, it's part of the process. I think we should assume that that's what will happen through regular updates. Emily Grubert.
Yeah, I just want to agree with that point and say that even if it is something where we're expecting that there's an amendability in the future, something like basically putting a placeholder of 0 for land use change and having that number be amendable rather than something where we say we're excluding land use change and establishing that precedent would make me a lot more comfortable. So agree with Emily's point that excluding land use change from the beginning sets a precedent that is a little uncomfortable.
So it seems like that could be added here. Oops, I'm not sharing, am I? So if we go to the arguments for excluding at the last bullet, would it be appropriate, Emily and Emily?
No, Catherine, I'm going to interrupt right here. If we're going to do this, it should be in the option.
Okay.
Not in the arguments.
All right.
So the question would be how to write it. Exclude land use changes, the proposed approach, until and unless,
Emily, do you have a suggestion?
Maybe something along the side of include land use change, but accept that potentially that number is going to be a 0 placeholder from the beginning while that's established or something along those lines.
Which I think would be a third option.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think excuse me if I misinterpreted. I thought it was option 1 was excluded until it is more well-defined.
Yeah, that's maybe a better way to do it.
Yeah.
That would be what I was suggesting or heading toward. If we're going to do this.
And be better defined, well-defined. Somebody give me some words here.
Yeah, I'm not sure I love it. I mean, I could live with include land use change, but set it 0 for up to 3 years until first triennial review. I don't know.
Yeah, me too.
I'm in favor of excluding land use change until it can be better quantified for Vermont's market or something to that effect.
Well, how's this? Until the effect of Vermont's use of biofuels on land use change can be better quantified. How's that?
I like Emily's point of trying to put a time limit on that in either case, something along the lines of exclude until next triennial review when this should be revisited, or maybe something along those lines. It's saying until it can be better quantified, I think is going to lead to it just not ever being quantified.
But I think the issue paper lays out the statutory requirements of looking at land use change as part of those biennial and triennial evaluations. So I think it's built into that process. I don't know if we need to be more specific than that.
I don't like reference to any better quantified because that implies it just, I think it should say, if you're gonna insist on excluding first, then it should say exclude land use change, but revisit during first triennial review or something like that.
That sounds simpler.
Yeah.
Well, it should be revisited through any triennial review, not merely the first. Through any, and it's also.
I don't want it to be revisited in the 2047 triennial review, Rick.
No, you misunderstand.
Oops.
It would be reviewed in every review. It would be that's the point of the reviews so it would be the first, second, third, and fourth. It would happen every time is all I was trying to say.
And I think that's what the issue paper says, is it's automatically part of that list of things that the PUC is supposed to look at. Right?
That might be, but I think if our recommendation is to exclude it, that almost sounds like we're changing the desire. So the to be revisited, I think the redundancy is, I think, acceptable in this situation.
How about exclude land use change to be revisited pursuant to statutory requirements?
I think the triennial review is better. I don't know if you can live with it, Floyd, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Emily.
Okay, well, it sounds like then we have an option 1 as amended, that if folks were in favor of excluding it, that should be understood to be revisited through future triennial reviews. Is that how it's?
IE, not UA.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, there's an either triennial. Yeah. And then IE instead of UA.
I thought Is that right? No.
All right.
It's
That doesn't look
IA.
right. I better put my spell check on.
No.
I think it's TRIENNIAL. That's what I've got.
Correct.
TRIENNIAL.
Oh, TRIE.
NNA.
There's got to be an N in there.
Two N's, then IAL.
AL. Okay. Let's see if spell check lets me do that.
My only concern with this is that it's not only triennial reviews. There can be reviews requested at any time, which is a good thing through future.
Or when requested. Can we add that?
Yes, or when, yeah.
I just think it's simpler to just say pursuant to the statute, but
This is Patrick. I agree with Floyd on that if we're trying to wordsmith all this stuff.
yeah, I mean, let's just keep it simple. It's as required or pursuant to the clean heat standard requirements. And whether it's biennial, triennial, or per request, it's all built into that.
Yeah, but there's been a lot of questions about statutory interpretation, so I just think if we can be a little bit more clear. I would also love if this said exclude land use change initially and revisit through future updates, or something.
Are we then suggesting an approach that would differ from the statutory guidelines or requirements?
No.
I mean, I don't know. To me, these will all be reviewed in perpetuity throughout the program. It's pretty simple. I don't know why we're going beyond that.
I tend to agree. Pursuant to statutory requirements, it would be satisfactory to me.
Oh, goodness. Well,
Well, I think I could not support an option that could lead a reader to assume that we are recommending a permanent exclusion. Like, I just think that the way that it's phrased here matters, because it may never be revisited if we have like a strong statement that they should be excluded right at the top.
But I don't think that's accurate, though. The statute requires a look, an evaluation of a variety of potential impacts, including land use change. I mean, it explicitly requires that evaluation. So I don't see how interpretation could be otherwise.
It seems that we are all agreeing with the same thing. It's just a matter of wording.
Right, and I think that this language as included communicates clearly, more clearly, some of these sentiments about that this is a temporary assumption. And, you know, referring to statute requires people to go to statute. And this says very clearly, we're asking you to look at this again specifically, not just say, oh, go look at the statute, figure it out. So I appreciate the language as it is written here, because I think that clearly states the requisite that some people are concerned with this initial start, and this says we're gonna review it.
And it's not in contradiction with the act. So if we could agree to this language, we can move to a vote.
Hi, Catherine. I'm trying to clip and paste into the chat the section about reviews. So just give me a moment.
Are you in disagreement? You want to raise another point, Brian? I think we have it now is it doesn't refer to the act specifically. So if you're comfortable with the way it's written, I think we're ready.
Matthew has put it in, periodically assessing and reporting.
That's what yeah, because we were talking about triennial reviews, but triennial's not anywhere in the act.
I wondered about that.
Just quickly chime in and say 8128D says the emissions analysis that is currently being performed by Opinion Dynamics for measure characterizations does include an annual review by the commission, and this process could be incorporated through that.
Yeah, could we just say through periodic reviews? Or when requested? Because I think that periodic language was in there.
Ah, Patrick. How are we doing now? We could reference in parenthesis the section of the act that refers to this. That meets both needs, if folks would be comfortable with that.
I still think that there should be some reference to the statute. I mean, you know, if I was someone, you know, this thing gets adopted, I requested a review of it immediately after adoption. That really wouldn't make much sense outside of the context of the statutory requirements.
Could we just say pursuant to and then give the section?
That's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah.
There's two sections. There's that have been put into the. So do we want to refer to both of them?
You could put in put a comma after requested and say pursuant to 30 VSA sections 8128A3 and 8128D.
Oops.
We can clean up the notation later, but yeah. period. And I would ask you to put a comma after the close parenthesis.
Here?
No, up after approach. Before to be revisited.
Oops, sorry.
Just. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, are we ready to vote?
Can I ask a question about voting? I still prefer option 2. I can live with option 1. I know we're not doing like ranked choice voting, but I wasn't sure how to convey that. Like, I definitely prefer option 2.
We're not doing ranked choice voting.
Yes,
You only have 2 options anyway.
2 options. And whatever the vote is, we're going to, we'll say at the bottom of the document or at the top, we'll add to the document, the vote was X for this, Y for that, and the document then gets forwarded to the PUC.
But like our last vote, there can also be comments for those. So Emily, if you vote for option 2 and many other people vote for option 1, there can be a reason why or some description about your vote for option 2 does not exclude your support for option 1.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right, then let's do this. I changed this on the fly. I did not put in the full language, so I'm going to leave the language up for people to refer to it. So the vote says land use change, direct and indirect land use change, option 1, exclude land use change, ... per the language that we just agreed to. And option 2 is include land use change, ... per the language that was proposed, and you have an abstention option.
And for transparency's sake, we do need to say how we voted.
Yes.
I'm not positive those are the correct statutory references. I'm not gonna, I don't know. I just wanted to flag that.
What are you flagging, Emily? That they aren't the correct?
Yeah, I'm just checking them against the references to land use change.
We have 2 folks that haven't voted.
They're the correct references, but we can
Can-
correct them if they're not. But Matthew has put them into the chat.
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
Can we, yeah, okay, now we have 11 votes. Now we have 12 votes. So I will share with you.
What, option 2 got amended?
No, it didn't. Option 2 did not get amended.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Have you voted yet, Brian?
No, because I thought I heard that option 2 got amended.
Okay, well, could you, so I'll leave it open a moment so you can vote. Okay. All right. I'm ending the poll and I'll share the results. And so you should see right now that we have 9 in favor of it, or 9 for option 1. Let me say that. Exclude, and 2 for option 2, include, and 2 abstentions. So we need to identify the 2 folks that abstained first, and I'm assuming Jared, you might be one.
I was the second.
Jared and Emily, okay. And the 2 folks that are in the minority for option 2.
Emily Grubert is one of those.
Yeah, I was the other one.
Okay.
Police have abstained and voted no.
And did you want to say something to the effect about your vote that you mentioned earlier?
I would say I still support the arguments laid out under option 2. I can live with a temporary setting land use change at 0 initially, as long as it will be revisited. So I can live with option 1, but I think philosophically, I think they should be included.
Yeah, similarly, I'm uncomfortable with recommending an exclusion of land use change, particularly because it's something that the statute asks us to do, but option 1 is livable as amended.
Thank you. Ken?
Okay.
Yeah, isn't the practical application of what we just moved on that we're not asking Opinion Dynamics to do anything? But I appreciate this discussion, but you know, it's a fairly strong. It may not be. It's an okay majority. It's not the strong majority, maybe. But again, what it means is we're not. It does not require Opinion Dynamics or Public Utility Commission to request Opinion Dynamics to change its approach. So I think the communication is appropriate. So the PUC knows we really looked at this issue. We have some recommendations, but again, practically, they're allowed to go forward without modifying their work.
Well, that's
on the land use part of their carbon intensity.
I would agree with that generally, Ken, but this isn't really in the end about Opinion Dynamics at all. It's about what we think the PUC should do as a general matter. But yes, we're saying we've looked at it, we've debated it, here's where we come out.
Okay, so
Ryan?
Yeah, just excuse me. We're still the technical advisory board, right? Like we could write anything and the PUC is not required.
That's correct.
To do anything that we say.
That's correct.
Right? I mean, this is very important. Don't get me wrong, but I just want to understand the landscape here. Or
Yes.
level set on it.
Yes,
So-
we advise the PUC. That's it.
So in that vein, this memo has to be redrafted to reflect the vote. That said, I want to ask and get clarification whether we want to include arguments that were discussed on both sides in the memo, or are we just conveying our vote? Are we conveying our vote and the arguments for option 1 only?
No, I think the
Okay.
document as written gets forwarded with a note at the bottom that says, here's what the vote was. Which is what we did with our earlier statements as well.
Okay. Are folks comfortable with that? Okay, good. I needed that direction. All right, let's move on. Stop
Yes.
sharing.
It's 11:09 and we would normally take a quick break if folks, I'll leave it to you should we take a quick 5-minute break? We've got Brian and A&R to speak to us about where they stand, what they've submitted as of, I guess, yesterday, right, Brian? This means we've jumped, let's see, we've jumped the discussion of the rate of decline in biofuel CI. So we'll have to put that later in the meeting or take it up at our next meeting. Do folks want to take a quick break?
Can the A&R folks stick around till when? I'm assuming this will be a very short discussion because we have not seen this until just last night, so there hasn't been time to review it. So it would just be asking the authors to explain what's in here. And I think that's it, and get clarifying questions, and that will be deferred for later for any further deliberations and voting. So is your team able to stick around for our break, our additional 5-minute break?
I see Molly's on. Molly?
Okay.
Yeah, I think Catherine was planning to join. I think she can stay later. I may have to jump off, but then she'll be on. So I think that's fine.
All right, well, let's go till 11:15 for a quick break, and then we'll come back. And you're up next, Brian and Molly.
Thanks all. Oh, okay.
All right, apologies for truncated break again. But if folks could rejoin, show us you're on video, you're back. Great.
Okay. We're going to spend some time now talking about wood fuel emissions factors. We're going to turn it over to Brian, but before we, and A&R, but before we do, I just want to say that we will not be discussing advanced wood heat at all today. We haven't settled on, finally settled on the document that we want folks to look at. So that will be at our next meeting. And also, I will be departing in 15 minutes, and I apologize profusely for that. Emily Levin will take over as chair, and Catherine will continue, of course, as facilitator. I just had a previous engagement scheduled long ago, so my apologies for that. So with that, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Sorry you have to go. I can give you a special briefing later, should you desire it. So I'm here with Molly Willard and Catherine Servideo from the Forestry Division, Forest Parks and Recreation. Thank you for your patience as we work through preparation of this issue brief. I know it had been scheduled for discussion a couple of times, and we delivered it as soon as we could, but I know we just got it yesterday. Before I leap into this, Catherine, how much time do you want to allot to this?
15 minutes would be great. So if you just explain the recommendations in the document, and then we could take clarifying questions. I mean, it's a lengthy document, I understand, and there's a lot in there. So if we could just start with the highlights of the recommendations or open questions. I know you had some questions in there too.
Okay, sure. So 15 minutes. The memo is structured into 5 sections as it shows right in the up front. I was going to talk a little bit about the greenhouse gas inventory and forecast just to level set the group on that. But I can do that very, very briefly. And then I was going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Molly and Catherine to talk about, as you said, the various issues that we have, because we're covering a lot of stuff here that's all related to emissions from wood fuels. Does that sound good to
Sounds good.
everybody? Okay. So I'll start with just, like I said, a level set on the greenhouse gas inventory and forecast and treatment of biogenic CO2. So these reports are required by the legislature, by statute, and they estimate the historic emissions from 1990 and 2005. Those are the baselines that we're using for the what used to be the goals and are now the statutory requirements for economy-wide emission reductions. The inventory uses a methodology that is consistent with the IPCC guidelines for greenhouse gas accounting. They are reported on a gross basis for the 7 economic sectors that have emission reduction requirements in the GWSA, and those are agriculture, electricity, industrial processes, fossil fuel industries, residential, commercial, and industrial sector that's primarily for heating, transportation, and the waste sector. So the inventory is in boundary so within the state and sector based on those sectors, and it's in boundary except for the electricity sector, because while we use a lot of electricity, we only generate in state about 1/3 of what we use. So that is the only sector where, from the inventory side, emissions from outside of the state are recorded. Are accounted for. And this inventory, it's primarily a use or combustion-based emissions. So it's for direct emissions that are occurring in the state with these sectors. In the IPCC guidance, emissions of biogenic CO2 that are related to combustion or decomposition, they are accounted for in the net flux of carbon in the land use change, and forestry sector. Now, that's a sector that we also is a component of the report, but it is not a part of the targets that were set in the GWSA. And I could go into how we actually got to where those original goals were set and how we got to where we got to today, but I don't need to. The thing to remember is that the targets, the requirements in the GWSA are established based upon those sector-based in-boundary emissions. Now, we do report, like I said, the inventory report, it does account for the land use change, and forestry sector. And you can see that it does these gross emissions, and also you will see that it does a net emissions accounting as well. So all of that information is in there regarding emissions from combustion of biofuels and all the other emissions from fossil fuels, and for sequestration from forests in state in Vermont, in state and ag land. So that is all there. It is true that it's difficult, particularly when the first inventory was done in 2007, the data for establishing that land use change, and forest carbon flux was difficult to get, particularly at the state level. It's gotten better over time, and we continue to update and improve the inventory to be able to refine that number, but it is complex. And so, yeah, we'll continue to work on that. But for the purposes of this biomass discussion, that's the way the inventory works. So in those sectors, gross emissions from those sectors, and then those are what the GWSA targets are based upon. I'll just pause quickly for any clarifying questions on the inventory. And seeing none right away, then I'll pass it over to my colleagues at the Forestry Division to talk about the rest of the memo.
Thanks, Brian. My name's Catherine Servideo. I'm the Forest Economy Program Manager with Forest Parks and Recreation. I just want to clarify, one, the time remaining for our spot here, but then also there's a lot in this memo, and I think I heard earlier that we're just talking about the emissions and not advanced wood heating and some of the other parts of this memo today. Is that correct?
Not about advanced wood heating at this point. That's correct.
Okay.
Can I just clarify that I think we will be talking about advanced wood heating today, but not during this slot. There's been some additional work that others have done on that topic, so would encourage ANR to focus on the carbon intensity elements of your memo for this item.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll be pretty brief because I think we don't have a ton of time for this time slot. But first, I just want to say I appreciate being able to be here today and speak with you guys. The purpose of the work that we put into this memo is really just to provide some context about Vermont's forests, forest management, and wood utilization in support of your work and decision-making process. So in this second section, which is I think what we're really just going to be talking about today of the memo, which is about the use of GWP biofactors and the biogenic footprint calculator. I think it's important to look at some of the definitions that I included. Throughout the memo and today, I use the terms residue and byproduct when talking about wood fuels, while Opinion Dynamics uses the term wastes. And so I just want to make sure that when we're looking at the memo, we're all using or understanding the terms the same way. In the memo, I touch a little bit on the 2024 inventory, the greenhouse gas inventory and reporting and forecast report. In that report, ANR mentions the use of GWP bio and the biogenic calculator, the footprint calculator that was developed by the World Wildlife Foundation in Qantas. And it mentions it in the context as one possible framework for understanding emissions of biogenic carbon, but that additional exploration of it is needed. So I do think that that context is really important for this discussion. With that said, we had some feedback on the work done so far for wood fuels. Opinion Dynamics recently proposed a revision to their treatment of wood chips and pellets. And our conclusion or recommendation in the memo is that we agree with their revised approach. It creates consistency between these wood fuels that have similar feedstocks. When it comes to commercial firewood, there are a few points that I think need some further discussion. And they really focus around Opinion Dynamics has proposed an assumption that commercial firewood is produced through purpose-grown and harvested feedstock. That's not consistent with Vermont's forest management and wood utilization. The majority of firewood used in Vermont and produced in Vermont is produced as a byproduct of forest management activities. They're not harvests that are conducted specifically for the production of wood fuels. The exception being that harvest for firewood by individuals for personal home use, that is an exception to that statement. But for commercial firewood, these are going to be byproducts of forest management activities. And in their most recent memo, Opinion Dynamics looked at a report that was produced with FPR, but for FPR, on the economic contributions of the forest products industry in Vermont. And they used some data from that economic report to conclude information about Vermont's forest composition. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding there. That data is based on land area. So they looked at the species composition by land area, not use or volume. So there is data available through the U.S. Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis Program on Vermont's forests. And we encourage the TAG and Opinion Dynamics to use the best available data for Vermont's forests and forest management when looking at their work. FPR is happy to facilitate access to any FIA data if that's helpful and on request. So please, happy to do that, but we don't think that the use of the economic report is a way to do this. I think the big picture recommendation that we have is that when looking at wood fuels, we encourage and recommend that it always use the best available data about our forests, forest management, and wood utilization. There are known limitations to the calculator, to the biogenic carbon footprint calculator, to adequately do that. And we have concerns about its use because of that. And if it's going to be used to estimate GWP biofactors, it is important that that context be really clearly communicated and that those numbers are not specifically based on Vermont information. So I feel like I ran through that very, very quickly. I'm happy to take questions or clarify anything. And if Molly is still on, I would also ask, if she has anything that I might have missed or wants to add.
I'm still on for a few minutes, and that sounded good. So I don't have anything to add.
Thanks, Molly.
Can I ask Brian, given the timing of the requested comments, is A&R planning to submit these separately to the PUC rather than wait for any kind of tag action on these issues?
We hadn't discussed it. We were focusing on getting this deliverable in front of the tag.
Okay. Yeah, Ken.
Maybe this will end up being a rhetorical question, but ANR has, the responsibility to oversee the climate change work as well as manage its forest products. Is there any way that ANR could produce a carbon intensity value for the different wood products? Because, Opinion Dynamics has 1,000 responsibilities. And if you folks could take this on, I would appreciate it, but I know that's a difficult question.
Brian, do you have any?
Like besides, we're engaged in a few other things as well, Ken. So we'll take it under advisement, I guess is the best way I can respond today.
I'd like to clarify the tag action. I know we're not going to take any tag action today, but do we, just given the timing that we're now missing any deadlines we were supposed to meet for Opinion Dynamics, I do think there could like the other topic issues have been framed in terms of a set of options. And I guess I was expecting that we would be working towards presentation of like a recommended approach for accounting for the carbon intensity of wood and dealing with this GWP bio issue. I know we've gotten a host of public comments as well on this topic, which I haven't, had the chance to fully absorb some of the recent ones. So we would need more time if we wanted to actually do that. But is that still what we are like? Is the plan still for us to do that at the next meeting, or is there no point because we've missed the deadline at this point? Like, where are we on tag action? And maybe I'll pose this in a question for Deirdre. Given in your remarks at the beginning, you said you were pushing back Opinion Dynamics schedule a little bit. Like if the tag were to revisit this, actually have a chance to discuss a couple of specific options for treatment of carbon intensity of wood and take a vote at our next meeting in 2 weeks, is that useful insight to provide, or is it not actionable anymore?
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry, I had to also switch to phone.
Yes, yep. We can.
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, I want to say, I'll be meeting with Opinion Dynamics after this meeting to transmit kind of the decisions made by the tag, and I hesitate to promise that, to keep delaying the second draft of their deliverables to accommodate more time and deliberation on this, but I know that they are specifically, guidance on wood emission factors is something that they are specifically asking the tag for and really kind of needing input. So, I can get back to the group maybe in the interim about how Opinion Dynamics would like to proceed with this, but yeah, I hesitate I don't think it would be useless, but I also, the more specific and the sooner this feedback can come, the more likely it's going to be able to be incorporated and give the tag another review period before it gets finalized in the final deliverables.
And so just in terms of framing up a next step, then I think this write-up from ANR is useful for sure. I think given sort of ANR's need for internal alignment and coordination, it may not be appropriate for ANR to be the entity that frames up these options for tag consideration. I just want to suggest that because that's what I originally thought was assigned to ANR, and that isn't exactly what we've got here. So do you agree with that, Brian? And if so, I'm wondering if there's anyone else on the tag who would be willing to kind of take on like reframing this topic of carbon intensity of wood in a manner that could be articulated as a set of options for tag voting, or is there no issue remaining? Like, are we all agreed on everything and there's nothing to vote on? I don't think we're at that point, but I'm just trying to frame up kind of how to move forward.
Yeah, I'll stipulate to the fact that this is structured a little bit differently than some of the other memos. That's fair. But it's a complex issue. I think like where where we are regarding the characterization of, of pellets and chips is where Opinion Dynamics ended up and their last iteration. And if that's something that is that an example of an issue or an item for the tag to vote on? Is that your question?
Yeah, I guess so. I think the public comments, I've seen some debate over the characterization of, are pellets totally made of waste materials, or I'm probably not using the right word there, but Ken, maybe you could help me. I suspect you may know more about this than I do, but I think there's some issues here that are not like 100% agreed on. Haven't had time to absorb this memo with enough time to articulate exactly what those are, which makes me think that there should be maybe like a subgroup or a couple people that take this on and try to delineate the issues that may still be up for some discussion.
So interested to hear if there's anybody else in the tag that sees issues here that would benefit from a tag-wide vote recommendation. And again, I just reiterate that A&R, this is A&R's product, and they are certainly able and to submit it separately to the PUC at any point. But I think what Emily's asking is, does the tag want to take this on and make recommendations separately? Anybody want to pursue this, want to volunteer to do that, to help reframe this? Not seeing a lot of volunteers, that's for sure.
I mean, another specific issue is the A&R memo says, should the tag and OD move forward with the use of GWP bio for wood fuels? It seems like there are some assumptions embedded there that need to be decided. I don't know. I would like to think about this a little bit more. I'm not sure where we are on public comment, Catherine, as well, but I know this topic in particular is one where we've gotten a lot of public comment. So it's one in which I suspect hearing a couple of public comments might help us think through some of the remaining
Well, I
issues.
wasn't intending to take public comment on this because we're not making a decision. So we can save it if we have time at the end to see if there's additional public comment.
Yep.
Because we got quite a few more issues that we do need to vote on.
Okay. I mean, I
That's
can try to take on kind of thinking about this some more. I just frankly haven't had the bandwidth to absorb what A&R has provided, combined with all the various public comments addressing these issues, and sort of take stock and see where we're at. If I would love some help with that, so as I have a lot of other things on my plate. Luce?
Yeah, I can help you with that, but don't we have to comment by tomorrow? That's my angst, is how, what is it going to mean if we study this further?
Well, I mean, that's what I asked Deirdre, and I think what I heard was we are not going to comment by tomorrow on this item.
Right.
If A&R wants to file their comments as A&R, they can file those to the ticket. And they will be considered. It sounded like from Deirdre that they do need our input expeditiously, but they are pushing back Opinion Dynamics schedule a little bit. So if we can do something in the next week or two to weigh in a little more concerted way, that could potentially be factored in.
Right. We received quite a few reports from the public. Some are more, I would say, more valid than others. Some are more scientific based than others when I've looked at them. So maybe I can look at those a little more carefully and get back with you, Emily.
Yeah, I think, and the comment deadline tomorrow is on the rule. And this is more about the Opinion Dynamics work. So yes, I acknowledge what Deirdre said, and that, we're trying to finish this as expeditiously as possible, but it's not on the same deadline as the comments on the rule.
Okay.
Emily, Adam had to jump, and I don't want to raise his hand for him, and I'm not sure what feedback he has on this topic, but I'm sure he'll be in touch with you if you need any support in whatever way.
Okay,
he's being voluntold. Okay. So we've got Luce, Emily, and Adam on board to at least take a closer look at all this and see what, if any, tag action might be warranted. All right. Thank you. Thank you for going over this with us, Molly, Catherine, and Brian.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
before they hop, Catherine, I know Rick had said we were going to skip advanced wood heat, but I would really like to take a couple minutes to just do a status update and next step while we've got A&R still on.
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
Kind of to do a quick touch base on the schedule. I just wanted to make sure nobody from A&R hopped off if you're able to stay.
Yeah, happy to make that change up in the order.
Because yeah, I'm sorry, I think I rejoined after the break, like 30 seconds late. Where can we go to advanced wood heat for a minute now?
Yes.
So on this one, let me just attempt to, so I'm putting on my, like, someone who contributed to this hat, not my tech facilitator hat, but I just wanted to kind of give a status update. There's been a lot of back and forth between me and some of my NESCOM colleagues. I want to acknowledge Nora Travis and Lisa Rector, who are joining today, both of whom have a great deal of expertise on wood emissions issues. And so what I think I think we were after the last TAG meeting is that we were approaching some agreement on a pathway, and we were starting to articulate that, and then we sort of ran into a lot of detailed questions around what exactly the efficiency and emissions criteria should be for various types of wood products. And that is proving that it's to take a little longer. I think there's also some questions about how we might try to align this, if and how, with some of the current incentives from Efficiency Vermont. So we definitely want to work with Efficiency Vermont more on that. And we kind of ran out of time. But if Catherine, I was wondering could you just pull up the document I sent this morning, because it would be very helpful for me to kind of get a sense of, like, are we headed in the right direction high level? I'm not going to go into the detail.
Well, it hasn't been distributed, so nobody's seen it.
I know, but I just wanted to show it to people and say, like, this is what is going to potentially be coming your way. Or I guess what I have attempted to do is synthesize what was options 2 and 3. And it would be very helpful to me to get a sense of, like, does this seem like it's headed in the right direction? If so, we can continue to flesh this out, or do we need to go back to having, like, multiple options? I guess Adam's not here anymore, but I don't know. I was just looking for some high level, like, we were headed down a path of establishing criteria for emissions and efficiency. And the result of that would be that cordwood would be excluded at this time because of the emissions issues. And does anybody, like, broadly disagree with continuing down that path?
This is Catherine with FPR. I think there's A&R, like FPR, I think maybe has some clarifying questions to that, because cordwood appliances versus cordwood stoves, I think that there's a difference there. And I just want to make sure that we're understanding the terminology the same way. Based on what I've seen, a lot of the concern is around cordwood stoves, not necessarily all cordwood appliances.
So yeah, so that's an issue. So I think where we are is we need to take some more time to work on this in a subgroup. NESCOM is happy to work on this. We have a lot of experience. I'm assuming Efficiency Vermont and Adam would work with us. It would be great to engage with A&R, but I just wanted to note that, like, we're going to need to take this to a little bit more of a process, because this turns out to be kind of the devil's in the details on a lot of these items. So I just wanted to share kind of where we're at with that. And Nora?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to weigh in. I think that's exactly some of the things we need to talk about. One being this need for discussion or wanting to delve into cordwood appliances and separate out stoves and boilers, when in fact, actually, there's a lot of data that cordwood boilers are in fact quite high emitting to the effect even of a more concern than stove. So I do think, we do need to have further discussion on that. And also there's the need to sort of coordinate with some of Efficiency Vermont in terms of like how rebates are structured. And I'm not sure if that's really been done thus far in the advanced wood heat discussion, because that actually requires professional installation to be rebated by Efficiency Vermont. And I don't know if we've had that conversation with the tag. So we recommended that this be like an offline discussion without dragging it down like in today's meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Again, we're not debating the issue now as much.
Thanks, everyone. I was just going to ask if we haven't seen the document. It seems like the right way to do this process wise is to send that separately and go through it like we have the other documents. And I'm conscious of the fact that, we have a number of items to vote on. Those items have been pushed back again and again and again. So all due respect, I'm moving to move on from this to the voting items.
So we've got EVT, NESCOM, and ANR. If anyone else is interested in participating in kind of a rework of this, please let us know, and we'll figure out how we can engage a subgroup. I think, Catherine, rather than circulating what I sent this morning, we probably should try to get something on the calendar next week so we can get it a little farther along, but actually send it out well in advance of the meeting and not like moments before, as we've been wont to do on the wood issues. So by next Friday at the very latest, assuming I don't know if we're going to have a tag meeting next week, actually. So let's, I guess, revisit all of this, but we can move on now. Just wanted to let folks know that I have some hope we may be able to reach consensus on this issue. We just need more time to iron out some of the details.
Understand. Thank you very much for the update. So we need to jump back now to the rate of decline of the biofuels carbon intensity issue. And for that, let me see. Rick, who is no longer with us, did a redraft of this. And let me just make it big enough so everybody can see it. And before I share, I've highlighted in yellow the only portion of this that has been redrafted, which is the way option 3 is described. And I'm assuming this was sent out last Friday. I'm hoping everybody had taken the opportunity, the time given to review it. And we don't have the author specifically here, but I know others were involved in this initially. So I'm hoping somebody can answer any questions that might come up. So I wanted to open it up first for clarifying questions. Okay, none? In that case, I do have a poll prepared let me launch it. Oops, let me get it back here. Let me see how I worded this. So I changed the wording of that third option to be verbatim as you see. I can probably stop sharing here then so that it's not so messy on your screen. And so the poll is presenting the 3 options, a little bit truncated.
Yeah, so option 3, the full version, as in the Word document, it's there. It just got truncated in the poll, right?
Oops, yep, it did. It might have had a word limit on that. Apologies. So linear annual decline, option 1, option 2, step down, from below 60 to below 20, and option 3 as drafted. So folks are invited to vote. This might be a little more complicated because we've got more than two options.
Hey, Catherine, I'm not seeing a vote box.
You're not. People are voting. Anybody else having trouble?
Sorry, I can just vote with my
Hand.
raised.
Okay, or put it in chat. Would you mind putting it in chat? So I'm seeing 13 votes. So I'm ending the poll and I will share the results. And so there were 13. Were you able to vote, Sam, or what is your vote?
Yeah, I'm going with option 3.
Option 3. Okay. So that would give us 8 for option 3. Just to get that down. There is 1 for option 1 and 3 for option 2 and 2 abstentions. So now we're going to have to, I'm going to assume be easiest to just ask folks who voted for option 1 for transparency.
That was me, Patrick.
Patrick, okay. And option 2, who are 3 votes for option 2? Floyd, I may be covering up if you're raising your hand. I can't see it.
Yeah, I did.
Floyd, and who else?
Matt Coda.
Matt. And there must be one more. Somebody else vote for option 2.
There may only be 2 because of well, no, I don't know.
Says there's 3.
Okay.
And we had 13 people vote, which is how many we've got here. So somebody must have voted for option 2. I'm not sure we'll be able to count it if we don't get it verbally confirmed. So I think we'll have to say 2 votes for option 2. I think we don't have a strong majority for option 3. So I guess I would ask the folks that voted for both option 2 and, abstention. Did I ask who abstained? Jared and who else?
Myself
Jared.
again.
Emily Roscoe?
Correct.
All right. I wanted to suggest that the folks that voted for 2 and 1, if you had something that you would suggest that we could add to option 3 that would make it more palatable, that would make you be able to support option 3, which would certainly strengthen the support and the message to the PUC if we were to forward this.
I could start. I don't know if there's anything I would need to be changed. My preference would be option 2, but I could live with option 3.
Okay, that's helpful.
The ranked choice voting that I needed on the last one.
Ken.
So let's be clear, option 3 allows for options 1 and 2. It's just option 3 says that there will be a decision that finalizes whether it be option 1 or option 2 or something in between. So I don't know how that can be. We're not by taking on option 3, we are not excluding the possibility of option 1 and 2.
I believe that's correct interpretation. Matt and Patrick, do you have anything that would make you feel more comfortable with option 3? Patrick?
Yeah, my opinion's not that strong. I can also support option 3. I can live with it, and definitely don't think it's worth us spending a lot of time hashing it out.
Same, Matt Coda.
Same, Matt Coda, is that what you just said?
I said same.
Okay, great. All right. So I take that to be I think can live with it is actually a great way to describe your ability to support option 3. Maybe not wholeheartedly, but so it sounds like we have a strong majority that can live with option 3. And I guess in terms of actually reporting the vote to the PUC, I'm happy to leave you under your preferred option with the comment that you could live with option 3 if that's preferable, if that's the best way to describe it.
I think that would have been my suggestion, yeah.
Okay.
Works for me.
Okay.
And that's consistent with what we did on the land use change.
Exactly. Yes.
So good to be consistent across different issue areas.
Okay, we have now treatment of avoided methane of biofuels. And this is another revised version, so let me find that. And I believe the last fingerprints on this were also Rick's. So let me bring it up. But a number of you have also been providing input to this along the way. So let me share this.
Emily, I'll take the first crack here if you don't mind, since the prose section is first on the page.
Okay.
So first, just want to acknowledge that we did not have time for any discussion of this when it was first presented. So not that I'm suggesting we spend another 2 hours on it, but to the extent that folks have questions or comments on the pro set of bullets, I would go ahead and volunteer Patrick, but also myself, to answer those if we have them. Otherwise, the new additions to this. So I think there were 3 new additions, and I'm happy to read mine, which is number 8. And I know that they're not numbered, but Catherine, if you wouldn't mind just scrolling down a little bit, it's on the next page. So it's that one. Yeah, thanks. So the reason that we added this bullet on the pro side is that the con side cites a document from Argonne, which describes Argonne's intent to analyze various data puts into the GREET model, including for RNG, but for other energy resources as well. And that citation was from December 2023. So since then, Argonne has commenced a literature review as planned. And importantly, multiple presentations throughout 2024 have shown Argonne's progress and the new data that they've collected to revise the assumptions to their models. And so these slides, and it should be cited here, and it is, and I'll also put it in the chat, but I have one set of slides in particular. I think it's the most recent. It's from a presentation on September 11th, 2024. They indicate very clearly that avoided methane crediting will remain central to RNG carbon intensity scores in the R&D version of the GREET model. And so again, I just want folks to consider the fact that Argonne has made this choice based on RNG physically preventing methane emissions from these sites, which provides an outsized environmental benefit when considering the global warming potential of methane. And this is their attempt to basically recognize an important climate strategy. So I would say that to the extent Argonne is referenced in the document, it should absolutely be on the pro side in terms of, you know, what they are saying they are doing currently. And I'll leave the other two to Patrick, but happy to, I think that's right, Patrick. I think you wrote the next one. Maybe it's just one, but happy to answer any questions on that. And I'll post in the chat a reference to the recent presentation from Argonne.
Patrick, what additional revisions were made?
The next bullet point down, I could read it out loud if that's helpful, but essentially, to summarize, makes the point that under the Clean Water Acts, many states, including Vermont, require large farms to have long-term manure storage. That requires farms to, that is a unfortunate and indirect consequence of otherwise well-intentioned policy designed to promote water quality results in methane emissions. This means that these farms of a certain size, which are large farms, often have to store their manure that way, practically. It's not that they are legally required to store to create methane emissions, but they are legally required to have enough storage, which results in methane. And therefore, they need financial incentives in order to adopt other practices that avoid that methane. And programs that reward avoided methane crediting have proven to be successful financial incentives. That's probably would have been more clear if I'd read it. So sorry about that. The next point says that the way other jurisdictions have handled the fact that there could be in the future mandates to require methane reductions is they write into the rule that in the event of future mandates, then avoided methane crediting would cease. But since there are no such mandates anywhere in the country now, they do allow avoided methane crediting. And yeah, happy to answer questions.
Before we do that, are there changes to the arguments for excluding counterfactual emissions or upstream avoided methane, and I guess is the way we've rephrased it?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't catch this, but we had changed the language we had limited it to counterfactual methane as opposed to or sort of avoided methane, and this version seems to have reverted back to that, which I didn't catch. So there might be an issue with that language, because I think this discussion really is about the avoided methane specifically, and not not all counterfactual emissions. But yeah, as the person who wrote or like helped contribute to that, the arguments against counting for avoided methane, I'll try to heed Catherine's guidance to not retread ground that's already been covered. I am worried about the potential distortionary effects of having biofuels with negative carbon intensity scores, whereas things like weatherization and electrification would have a positive carbon intensity score and therefore look much less attractive. So I do worry about just the potential distortion on the program, and the fact that these counterfactual or these avoided methane shows up in different sectors as well, so it doesn't really contribute to meeting the inventory goals. So it just feels to me like there's the potential for rather large distortion of meeting the goals of the program in terms of reducing the actual thermal sector emissions by counting all these offsets that are occurring in agriculture and waste.
Is there anything that changed? I guess that was my question, Emily. Is there any new arguments or points that have been added since the last
There
version?
were some, yeah, I was just about to get to that, Catherine. The final point at the very bottom has been, if you scroll up a little bit, so there you can read the beginning of this. No, not that one. Like, this is a sub bullet. Can you just scroll up to the main bullet?
Ah, got it.
So you can see like all of that down to the last part. Yep. So this part has been reworked a little bit. And just one of the possibilities as like a compromise might be that we allow avoided emissions crediting, but we assume that the counterfactual is carbon dioxide rather than methane, which would have a much smaller effect on the carbon intensities, like a less distortionary effect in my view. The thing that I'm concerned about is, you know, I hear what Patrick is saying on, you know, it's helpful for farms to receive these payments, but I also think it sets a precedent. If people start receiving payments for things, what is essentially methane pollution, you're creating an incentive structure that could cause those folks to actually fight against just regulating their pollution, which arguably we should be doing because we're not going to meet our climate goals broadly if we just have uncontrolled methane flaring at manure lagoons and landfills. So, you know, I should have said venting, uncontrolled methane venting. They should at least be required to flare it. And even if there aren't current requirements requiring that, I think we should try to avoid setting up a precedent where somebody is going to have an incentive to fight against future methane regulations that could reduce their funding and payments under a clean heat standard. So that point is a little bit new and further fleshed out from the prior draft.
Okay. Again, I would like to limit discussion on the new points that have been added to the memo and not rehash old points. So with that, Sam, your hand was up, Floyd, and
Thanks,
then Emily
Catherine.
Gruber.
So on the last point, I think, and this is really important and fundamental to the concept of counterfactuals and avoided emissions and how the GREET model works and how all other programs which utilize the GREET model work, which is that they update the model. And these counterfactuals are created based on a regulatory baseline. So the moment that a regulation comes into place, which requires methane to be destroyed at these farms, the GREET model will be updated in Vermont and the methane crediting will go away. So to say this encodes a right to pollute is a fundamental misrepresentation of how these programs work. They're designed to provide a carrot for emission reductions where a regulatory stick does not exist. And if you don't mind, Catherine, I do want to address one of the other points because we've had zero discussion on this before. When we're talking about distortion in the program, I mean, again, it's important to understand that all of these fuels are assessed using a life cycle methodology. So there will be out of sector emissions included in that life cycle score for every energy resource. That's not just avoided methane, it's not just land use change, it's emissions from processing, production, transport of the fuels. So the program will have to adjust for that anyway. And, you know, the modeling that was presented earlier months ago in our discussions really expects electrification technologies to play a larger role than RNG, especially carbon negative RNG in any program circumstance. So I'm as someone who also, you know, hopes to see electrification in Vermont because of this program, I'm not worried that this incentive would dilute that at all. Thanks.
Lloyd.
All right, just real quick on that last point. Whether this is distortionary or not, I think we need to get back to the mission of the tag, which is to review the science and the technical aspects of this. And as has been discussed previously, the inclusion of these counterfactuals is scientifically correct. It's in pursuant to protocols that have been established by UN, IPCC, and other jurisdictions. And it involves the appropriate choice of system boundaries in which you do this life cycle assessment. So it's really a science question. It seems to me that if we keep it to that and leave out the policy considerations at this point, the legislature can determine whether it's an appropriate policy to pursue. But from a science basis, it seems to me, there's one correct viewpoint on this in terms of including the right system boundary that includes these counterfactuals until the landscape changes, as Sam just mentioned.
Emily Gruber.
Yeah, thanks. Just two quick things. First of all, avoided methane emissions are not negative emissions, and that's pretty clear in a lot of the ways that we define negative, especially as we're starting to see carbon dioxide removals. I think that that is a real pitfall of including them. But to this point about incentives particularly, I just want to emphasize that we have in the academic literature record evidence that having programs that reward things like avoided methane have actually had influences on how regulatory procedures follow. Basically, regulators choosing not to put a regulation into place because they don't want to disrupt an existing market situation. So this is a real risk that's been observed for years in other situations. And I think that this point that the counterfactual actually might change based on what we decide here is a really important one to keep in mind and is part of the scientific record. So fully support this point being a really important one.
Patrick?
Mostly try and move us along here, but I think this final point is veering into advocating for policy, not technical. But the overall, in order to move us along, the overall goal of this whole document was to share multiple perspectives. And I believe the question before the tag is whether to advance this document that shares multiple perspectives forward to the PUC. I don't know how you've exactly framed the voting question, Catherine, but I don't think it's very productive for the tag to continue to debate this issue very much further.
Just quickly, Patrick, I agree it's not productive for us to debate it farther. We've done a really good job of that at this point. But I think the recommendation here is whether or not the program should include avoided methane emissions as part of the modeling where applicable for certain biofuel feedstocks.
Thanks for clarifying that. And yeah, Catherine, I don't know how you have phrased the voting question, but if it's like that, then I had forgotten that.
It is.
Okay.
So before I launch that, public comment, any public comment on the new revisions that have been added? Tristan?
Thank you. Just real quick, I just want to note on the compromise proposal to treat methane emissions as carbon dioxide. Really big drawback to that is I cannot think of a single jurisdiction anywhere in the world that treats the global warming potential of methane the same as carbon dioxide. Almost everyone treats it the way the UN IPCC does. New York State is the sole exception to that, and that they treat methane as far more potent of a greenhouse gas than anywhere else does in the jurisdiction or in the world. So the proposal to go in the opposite direction, that basically means Vermont would be completely unaligned with every other jurisdiction that's trying to tackle methane emissions and greenhouse gas emissions more broadly. Thank you.
Sam, your hand is still up. Does that mean, okay. Other public comments, Pike? Just need to unmute your audio. Pike, we cannot hear you. It looks like your mic is muted. I'll put something in the chat. Okay. In that case, I'm going to launch this last poll. And it is stated in the not as an option 1 and option 2, but rather biofuels life cycle emissions should include avoided methane. Yes, no, abstain.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Do you have a short comment? Now we can't hear you. All right, we have 12 votes, waiting for one more.
I think that might be me. I can't see the poll this time actually, but I vote for not including avoided emissions.
Okay. In that case, that would give us 13. Ah, now I have 13. Maybe we have 14 people on. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Now we have, nope, somebody's voting that's not on the tag because Rick's not here. So we've got more votes than should be recognized for the tag. Is anybody who is not a member of the tag voting on the poll? If that is the case, you need to let me know right now on how you voted, and we need to revoke those votes, or I'm going to just start over again. I think we're gonna have to start over because there's more votes than tag members.
I'm
right.
sorry about that. I thought Alec had dropped off. He's got another call he's got to run to, so I voted on part of the department. But I believe we duplicated that vote.
Yeah.
And that
My
would have been,
apologies.
that would have been where, under what?
That was a vote for yes.
Yes,
There should
okay.
be an extra vote for yes there.
All right, so are folks seeing the votes? So that means we have only 7 votes, not 8, for yes. We have 4 votes, including Emily Grubert, for no. And we have 3 abstentions. Okay, can I ask the 3 people that abstained who that is?
Emily Roscoe from Efficiency Vermont.
Okay.
And Michelle Keller.
Okay, and Jared?
That's right.
Okay. And there should, okay, those are 3, great. And our 2 no's are Emily, or 3, excuse me, 4 no's. So Emily Grubert, I have you. Others that voted no?
I voted no.
Okay.
Ken
Anyone else?
Jones voted no.
Okay,
Brian Woods, no.
okay. All right, well, this is where we are. We do not have a strong majority. Everyone else voted yes, but that leaves that with only 7 votes. I guess one question I would have is for the folks that abstained, is it because you feel you just don't have an opinion, or you are uncomfortable with something in the, I know Jared, you have abstained for anything that doesn't address public health directly. But for Emily Roscoe and Michelle, is there something that would give you comfort and to actually cast a vote?
Mainly abstaining due to having a busy week and not fully reviewing this with others, but also have been abstaining for issues that aren't directly related to Efficiency Vermont and deferring to others that are experts at the matter. So I don't have anything specifically to add or take away from the document.
Okay, thanks for that. Michelle?
For me, I still see pros and cons on both sides, though if I needed to, I also would vote no.
Okay. Okay. So majority is yes. So then my question, I guess, goes to the folks that are no. This is you know, a yes no vote. This is a pretty binary question. So I don't know if there's anything that could be massaged in the language or the way that the yes include avoided methane is written that would make any difference to the folks that voted no, but would like to hear that if it is.
Not for me. I think that including avoided emissions as a negative factor in this is just fundamentally scientifically inappropriate.
Same here.
Okay. And that would also be Brian and Ken. You have anything you want to say with regard to your position on this? And
Yeah, I will acknowledge that mine is more of a policy position than a technical position. I don't disagree with some of the technical pieces that were raised, but the clean heat standard, I believe, was written as an approach to address Vermont's greenhouse gas emissions and the activity. I think there need to be other programs to encourage the inappropriate release of methane, whether that be in Vermont or elsewhere. So that's my thing. And I think by including avoided methane, I use the word skew or bias the overall credit system in a way that is not what I figured that the clean heat standard was intended to accomplish.
thanks for that clarification. And Brian, did you have anything you wanted to say about how you voted and why?
Yeah, I think similar to Ken, my understanding of the whole idea of awarding credits and using the life cycle analysis to award credits was to avoid a situation where compliance with the standard was creating demand in Vermont for fuels with like very high indirect carbon intensities or emissions that were, occurring out of state. If you were just, as opposed to if you were just using a combustion based or like an inventory style accounting for credits. It wasn't the idea to say, we're going to give like a whole bunch of credits for fuels with like that, on a global scale might have like very low or negative emissions. It was just to avoid bringing in fuels that had very high life cycle emissions. It's hard for me to understand how, if you have a fuel like RNG that, that has a negative carbon intensity score versus all the other alternative measures or delivered fuels, how that doesn't, result, because none of those emissions are going to show up as reductions in the inventory, except for the reduction in fossil fuels. And if you replace like a similar, if you have a fuel that has a very low or negative carbon intensity, and you replace it with, like let's say you have RNG from dairy that's got a negative carbon intensity, and you replace versus replacing fossil gas with a similar unit of gas from a landfill, where the counterfactual is that it's flared, you're getting the same amount of reduction of fossil fuels, but you're awarding a whole bunch more credits to the RNG pathway. And somehow that difference in not getting the reductions to meet the actual objectives of the program need to be made up someplace. And that's what I think where the distortionary effect comes in.
Okay. So I'm sensing from at least you, Emily, and Emily, that you are not in a position to change your vote no matter what. Ken, you seemed a little more circumspect, but I think there I would only ask, would you change your vote to yes, if to say that you could live with it?
No.
Okay, all right, then that's pretty sound. Yeah.
I have two thoughts. One, I'm kind of on the same boat as Michelle in terms of listening to discussion, leaning towards no, but I also wanted to put it out there that previously we've passed forward a memo sharing perspectives if we don't have the strong majority. So even if
Yes.
I voted for no as well as Michelle, it seems like 6 to 7 or even 5 to 7 isn't the super majority. And so wanted to flag that that's something we've done in the past.
Yeah, so that would be the intent. We would still forward the vote as it exists with the memo. and they can do with it what they want. I think our intention to get a strong majority is to send a strong message that the tag feels one way or the other, and this is clearly not where we are right now. So I will leave it there, and we have 5 minutes left. So this will be forwarded with the vote as corrected from here. It was 7, 4, and 3.
Can I just ask whether, I just wasn't totally clear from that discussion whether Emily or Michelle wanted to officially switch from abstain to no, or whether they want to stay in abstain.
You can switch me to no. It sounds like either way, we're going to have more discussion on this.
No, I wouldn't say that we are going to have more discussion. It's just to be clear. This is it. We're done.
Got it. Okay. Yep. You can vote. You can put me to no.
Okay.
And the same for me, Catherine.
Okay. So very split. All right. In that case, I think what we have left on our agenda is, Jared, I so apologize. It always seems like we get to you and we are again running out of time. So I want to just give you a chance to explain what it is that you shared last night and pose the 2 questions that you put into the revised document to the tag so that we can take it up next time.
Thank you. That's fine. I didn't really have much to add today other than, yeah, just calling attention to the updated draft that I sent around last night. The only change to that was to add the list of references at the end that was requested the prior week. So there's a few pages there of references, and I did state it was, a little bit more focused on probably the woody fuels and the other biofuels being areas of sort of more uncertainty, and the references for the sort of electrification strategies and weatherization strategies are relatively thin. I thought those were generally less controversial, so can come up with more. If you have other good ones, please share them. But yeah, it was mostly focused on sort of the different biofuels. The 2 questions were, one, I guess, for the folks that are really knowledgeable about the fuel sector, just looking for a little bit of guidance on what the reasonable expectations are for which biofuels may come into play in Vermont. There's, I think, 14 individual ones listed in some of the documents that I've reviewed in terms of clean heat standard fuels to be considered, and that's just an overwhelming amount to try to review individually. If we could focus it on the 2 or 3 or whatever it is that are the most likely to be used, that would certainly make the review process more reasonable and help us bring better information to the tag. Understand if that's not possible, but I'm hoping that might be possible for focusing the review. The second question was just related to the references, just asking for additional references if tag members or members of the public have references they want to share. I did provide a little bit of guidance on what types of references would be the most useful in the document. Yeah, if you take a look at that, scan through the references, see ones that we're missing, please, I guess, send them my way or send them to Catherine to distribute. I don't know what the best process for that is, but happy to take additional references.
Yeah, I'd actually prefer that they send them directly to you.
That's fine.
That would be so I don't have to be the intermediary.
I'll put my email in the chat just to make sure folks have it.
Perfect. Thank you.
And that was it. And I think otherwise there were some questions on page 2 of the first version of the draft that we'd still really like input on, if there's any input on kind of where we go from here with the review. Acknowledging that we already heard some feedback last week in terms of sort of separating impacts by types of biofuels. And, we've been looking for more resources related to the heating sector specifically, as opposed to transportation fuels. That's proven pretty challenging. but just, acknowledging that we did hear some feedback already and would love further guidance on kind of where to go from here with the review and how it could be used in this process.
Thanks. And Nora, did you have a question for Jared?
I just wanted to echo what Jared is asking in the sense that there's been a lot of time dedicated to reviewing the literature that he has done and that I have done. And I believe it was either last week or 2 weeks ago, there were some concerns about using transportation-related literature for the discussion of public health effects for biofuels, and that there were folks that said there were some references related to actual residential heat or use of biofuels for heat. And we would really ask that those references and citations be sent to Jared. Thus far, our exploration of the scientific literature has not developed any of those documents or scientific studies. So please send what you have to Jared. Thank you.
And Nora, right? You would ask Nora to be shared with you as well. And we gave you
Jared will keep me posted.
Okay. All right.
And he's a tag member. So we're just working together on it.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So Emily, I'll turn it back to you for closing.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine, in terms of framing next steps, I do think there are still some outstanding questions for the tag in terms of how to use this information on health impacts. And then we haven't even really touched on environmental impacts, their consequences. I do think there's some value. It sounds like by necessity, we've had to punt some of the various wood heating topics to a subsequent tag meeting. And I think the health impacts discussion has some, at least some overlap with that in terms of emission impacts of wood equipment, which ANR's memo also touched on, et cetera. So hopefully we can carve out a chunk of time at the next meeting or, after some subgroup work to really dive in a little deeper on some of these topics. And once everybody's had a chance to review everything and get caught up. Jared's memo will be posted. It was circulated to the tag, but it's not yet online, but it will be very soon. So just noting the overlap between the remaining topics that we haven't been able to resolve. And then in terms of today's agenda, the only other thing we had, I'm not sure if we've done the public comment or we are going to do more, and then we've got agenda items for next meeting that I was starting to talk through. It looks like we don't have an EAG update today. Is that right?
We don't have time for one today, unfortunately.
Yeah. So,
we're not planning to have public comment again since we had it throughout.
Okay. So just in terms of next steps, we did form kind of a wood subgroup to tackle, continue working on advanced wood heating and try to frame some of ANR's inputs in the form of any outstanding questions requiring tag action. All of the votes will be conveyed to the PUC for consideration with full transparency and conveying the discussion as well as the supporting information. Thank you. I think the fact that we've gotten through a lot of these major issues will mean that we actually finally have time to discuss the public health stuff at the next meeting, hopefully. Are there any other kind of upcoming agenda items and topics that you or Deirdre wanted to raise? Like, where are we going next, Catherine? And are we going to meet next week or in 2 weeks?
We have nothing on the schedule for next week. We're going to meet in 2 weeks. We did have sort of this, we keep putting it back on the agenda, translating the carbon intensity to credit values as one of our deliverables. And I think there is a PUC in the draft rule, there is reference to that. So I'm not sure exactly what else but we haven't discussed it. And identifying measures that lower energy costs, we have not addressed that either.
Ken?
Deirdre, can you remind me when might we expect another product from Opinion Dynamics with regards to the TRM?
I think that is kind of, you can hear me, right? You just can't see.
Yes.
Okay. So the next draft is kind of in flux given the decisions being made in this meeting. So it was initially on the schedule for tomorrow, I think, the next draft, but it didn't make sense for them to release a draft if you all were deliberating and sending decisions today. So I'll update the group, at the next meeting about what Opinion Dynamics might think about in a revised timeline to get the next draft in front of you all. I think that's probably the best I can give right now.
Because one of the points that I think we'll have significant discussion about is if the next draft includes specific, call it credit assignments for different technologies, different installed measures. I think that will spur a lot of discussion. So I'm hoping, the draft we saw included a lot of tables that were blank. And I think they said that they would be filling those in. When that happens, that will, I am pretty sure, require a lot of our time. So if they deliver a product next week that has that material in it, then that's going to be a very significant agenda item.
The only thing I'll add there is I think, and I'll look at the materials again, I think they have provided a lot of the decarbonization summary tables that weren't there initially. And just as a clarifying piece, my understanding is that those are examples of, these, the TRM includes formulas, and the summarization, decarbonization summary tables is if a clean heat measure was installed with these very specific circumstances, this would be the CO2e avoided emissions base. It wouldn't be a heat pump is this many credits. I don't think that that's the intention of what those summary tables are doing. It's just an example of like a common scenario, but understood that would, even having example values will spur conversation.
So it sounds like we can do a little bit more follow-up, and Deirdre will follow up with Opinion Dynamics offline to figure out next steps. Unfortunately, I think the work today has only resulted in clear direction for Opinion Dynamics on land use change. The other issues we either haven't resolved or are split. So, from my perspective, maybe Opinion Dynamics should do it both ways for avoided methane. Like, what would the values be with and without? I don't quite know what to do with a split decision in terms of their action. But it sounds like we should work on that offline a little bit more and circle back at our next meeting with a clearer game plan.
Yep, sounds good.
All right. So in terms of, I think what I'm hearing is, so we'll meet again in 2 weeks. We've started to identify some of the agenda items there. We will do some, either at least one and maybe more subgroups. We'll follow up online and we'll post those to continue fleshing out some of the wood heat issues for those who are ready to roll up their sleeves on that. I think the public health stuff is in good shape at this point. Just people need time to review it before the next meeting, and we probably won't revise that significantly, but if people have additional sources to cite, we can try to incorporate those, and then we'll circle back to those in 2 weeks. So we'll do more work on wood next week so that we're actually prepared and not scrambling last minute to get to it substantively at the next meeting.
All right. Thanks all. And appreciate you hanging in a little bit longer for this one. Good progress. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with us through the voting, and it's exciting that we actually made it to the point of voting on at least a few things. So thank you everybody for all your work and patience to get to this point.